You remember the silence before anything else. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that soothes you before sleep, but the heavy kind. The kind that presses against your chest, filling your room like a fog. You remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe, but never feeling the steady rhythm of someone else's arms around you. No one leaned down to whisper, "Good night." No one tucked the blanket beneath your chin. The lights turned off, the door closed, and you were left alone with the cold air. For some children, bedtime is where safety lives. Storybooks, forehead kisses, lullabies, sung off key. For you, it was different. You taught yourself to sleep without warmth. You trained your body not to expect comfort. You learned early, no one is coming. This is the story of the child who was never hugged, and you carry that story everywhere, even now. You might not notice it at first because you've become skilled at covering it. You smile. You achieve. You tell yourself you don't need anyone. But beneath every layer of performance, the body remembers. Your skin remembers. The nervous system remembers, because touch isn't just touch. For a child, it is the first language of love. A hug tells you, you exist, you matter, you are safe. When that language is missing, the silence becomes a wound. And that wound doesn't heal simply because you grew older. It follows you, shaping the way you trust, the way you love, the way you see yourself in the mirror. So I'll ask you a question that might feel like a punch to the chest. What happens to a child when they grow up without the simple reassurance of arms wrapped around them? Does the child learn independence or loneliness? Does the child become strong, or just good at pretending? Does the child grow into an adult who can love freely? An adult who still aches every time they see affection they never had? You already know the answer, don't you? Because you've lived it. And that is what this video is about. Not just what was taken from you in childhood, but what it left behind inside your adult life. Not just the wound, but the survival strategy you built around it. But the most important part is this: wounds can become maps. And even if you were never hugged as a child, there is still a way to learn what it means to hold yourself now. You don't notice the wound at first. Because when you are small, the absence of something feels normal. How can you miss what you've never had? But your body knows. Your nervous system knows. A child without hugs becomes a child who learns to monitor the air in the room instead. Picture this. You're sitting quietly on the floor, building towers with your toys. You want to show anyone the castle you've made, but no one looks up. You keep waiting, scanning faces, reading the emotional thermostat of the room like a tiny detective. Is mom tired? Is dad angry? Is it safe to approach? Or will it only bring silence, or worse, irritation? So you stop asking. You stop reaching out. You fold your arms tight across your chest, as if you can keep yourself warm by sheer willpower. This is how the early wound begins, not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 little silences that teach you your need for affection is too heavy, too much. Psychologists call it emotional neglect. Not always cruel, not always intentional. Sometimes the parents themselves are carrying wounds of their own, too stressed, too numb, too consumed with survival to notice the small hands reaching toward them. But the effect is the same. You learn that your needs aren't safe, that to cry too loudly, to cling too tightly, risks rejection. And so you adapt. You become the child who doesn't cry, the child who doesn't demand. You tell yourself, "I'm fine," even when you're aching inside. This is not strength, that's survival. It's the invisible grief of a child who learns early that love must be earned, that comfort is conditional. But here's the cruel truth. A hug isn't just a gesture, it's the architecture of safety. Neuroscience shows that physical affection releases oxytocin, regulates the nervous system, teaches the body to calm itself. Without it, you live in a constant state of quiet alarm, hypervigilant, alone, small, and so. Without anyone realizing, the wound buries itself deep beneath your skin. A wound without blood, but one that bleeds into every part of who you'll become. When a child isn't hugged, they don't stop needing it. They just stop showing it. Because deep down, you learn something dangerous. If you reveal your hunger for love, it might be met with nothing. And nothing hurts worse than being ignored. So you built a mask. Maybe your mask was independence. You became the little adult in the house, tying your own shoes, pouring your own cereal, comforting yourself when nightmares woke you at night. And the adults around you praised it. They told you you're so mature for your age. You don't need much. You're easy. They thought it was strength, but it was only silence. Or maybe your mask was achievement. You learned that, while hugs were rare, applause was possible. So you brought home perfect grades, cleaned your room until it sparkled, performed on stage with a frozen smile. Every gold star was a substitute for the warmth you never felt. You thought, if I shine brightly enough, maybe they'll finally notice me. Maybe they'll finally touch my shoulder with pride. For some, the mask was caretaking. You read your parents' moods like weather forecasts, stepping in to soothe their storms before they even broke. You became the one to make others comfortable, to anticipate needs. To fix what was broken, even though you were still breaking inside, each role, whether achiever, caretaker, or independent ghost, had one purpose: to survive in a world where your needs were too heavy for the people meant to hold them. And here's the paradox. The world loved your mask. Teachers adored the quiet, well-behaved child. Relatives praised the helpful one. Friends admired the overachiever. You were rewarded for hiding the very thing that ached the most. But every mask has a cost. Because while you played the part others needed you to play, your true self was slowly being buried alive. Your longing for touch, your desire to be seen, your need to cry without shame, those were all locked away, hidden beneath layers of performance. And this is where the survival role becomes the prison. The very strategy that saved you as a child becomes the same wall that keeps you isolated as an adult. You became strong because you had no other choice. But strength without softness is just armor. And you've been carrying that armor for so long, you've almost forgotten there's a person underneath it, still waiting to be held. The child who was never hugged doesn't stay in childhood. They grow up and they carry the wound with them. You carry it. Even if you try to bury it under success, relationships, or distractions, it always finds its way back to the surface. You might find yourself in relationships where closeness feels like a double-edged sword. You crave intimacy, but the moment someone gets too close, you tense. A hand reaching for yours feels comforting one second and threatening the next. You might pull away without knowing why, then hate yourself for the distance you've created. You might live with hypervigilance, always scanning the faces around you, just as you did as a child, trying to predict mood shifts before they erupt. You can't relax, because part of you still believes safety can vanish at any moment. You might become a perfectionist, working yourself to exhaustion because achievements feel safer than vulnerability. It's easier to be praised for doing than to risk being rejected for simply existing. You might carry rejection sensitivity, where the smallest hint of disapproval feels like abandonment. A delayed text, a sigh, a distracted glance, your body reacts as if it's proof that love is slipping away, and you might struggle to believe in your own worth. Because deep down, the absence of hugs taught you something poisonous. If no one wanted to hold me then, maybe I was never worth holding at all. That lie lingers like a shadow, even if you know better in your mind. This wound doesn't just shape romance. It shapes careers, friendships, parenting. You may become the helper who never asks for help, the friend who listens but never shares, the professional who achieves everything yet still feels empty inside. The world may see strength, competence, even brilliance. But inside you often feel like an orphan surrounded by people, yet untouched in the ways that matter most. And here's the quiet tragedy. The survival role that once protected you is the same role that now keeps you from receiving the love you've always wanted. You built walls to keep the hurt out, but those walls also keep affection from coming in. This is the cost of never being hugged. Not just loneliness, but a lifetime of mistrust in your own need for love. Here is the truth you've probably never said out loud. You gave up your needs to keep your place in the family. Children are wired for attachment. It's not optionally survival. If a child has to choose between being authentic and being abandoned, the choice isn't a choice at all. You will sacrifice authenticity every single time. Because belonging means life. So when no one hugged you, when your reaching hands were met with silence, your young mind came to a conclusion that cut deep. If I stop needing, maybe they'll keep me. If I stop asking, maybe I'll be safe. You learned to bury your need for touch, comfort, and affection, not because you didn't feel it, but because you feared losing the fragile bond you had. That bond, even if cold, was better than nothing. So you gave up pieces of yourself in exchange for scraps of connection. And the heartbreaking part, you became good at it. You taught yourself not to cry too long, not to cling too tightly, not to shine too brightly. You trained your body to swallow longing, to numb desire, to silence the voice inside that begged, "Please hold me." This is why the wound runs so deep. You didn't just lose affection, you abandoned yourself to survive. And that abandonment still echoes. As an adult, you may tell yourself you don't need much. You may laugh off your cravings for intimacy. You may call yourself independent, strong, unbothered. But behind every mask is that younger self, still waiting at the door, still hoping for arms that never came. The deeper truth is this: it was never your fault. You were not unlovable. You were not too much. You were simply a child adapting to the emotional poverty of the adults around you. But the child you buried, the one who silenced their own needs to belong, hasn't disappeared. They are still inside you. And until you face them, until you recognize what they lost, that wound will keep shaping your story. Children will do anything for belonging, even abandon themselves. And that's exactly what you did. But now, the question shifts. Will you keep abandoning yourself, or will you finally learn to turn back and hold the child who has been waiting all along? There comes a moment in every healing story when you realize the hardest truth of all. No one is coming to rescue the child you buried, and I know how heavy that feels. Because part of you still waits for it, the parent who will finally apologize, the partner who will finally complete you, the friend who will finally give the unconditional care you've always needed. But waiting keeps you frozen. Because the truth is that rescue isn't coming. But here's the light hidden inside the pain. While no one else is coming, you are still here. And you are not powerless. That child you silenced, they are still inside you, waiting not for your parents, not for the world, but for you. You are the only one who can walk back into that dark bedroom, kneel beside that lonely bed, and whisper, "I see you. I will not leave you again." This is what psychologists call reparenting, becoming the safe, nurturing presence that you never had. It's not about erasing the wound. It's about learning to tend to it with compassion. To give yourself what was denied, it might feel awkward at first, strange, even impossible, because the scripts you learned as a child told you that needing love was shameful. But the turning point begins when you realize those scripts were lies. Lies born from other people's limitations. And once you see that, the chains start to loosen. You are no longer just the wounded child, trapped in silence. You are the adult who survived. The adult who can choose differently. You can stop abandoning yourself. You can stop waiting for others to give what they may never give. You can decide right here and now to become the arms that finally hold you. This isn't about denying the past, it's about reclaiming the future. A future where you don't just carry your wound like a scar, but where you learn to transform it into strength. The turning point is simple, but it will change everything. No one is coming to save the child you buried. But you can, and you must. Healing begins the moment you stop running from the child inside you and finally turn toward them. And while the wound may feel overwhelming, the path forward is not about perfection, it's about presence. The first step is shadow work. This means bringing into the light the parts of you that were once pushed into the dark. The loneliness, the longing, the hunger for touch that you once called too much. Shadow work asks you to stop judging those parts and start listening to them. You write about them in a journal, speak to them in therapy, or simply notice them without shame. Because what was once buried only heals when it is seen. The second step is inner child work. This isn't abstract. It's a practice. Imagine your younger self, sitting on the edge of that cold bed, small and unseen. Picture yourself walking into that room as the adult you are now. Kneel down. Place a hand on their shoulder. Tell them what they always needed to hear. You matter. You are lovable. I will not abandon you. This isn't pretending. This is rewiring the story, teaching your nervous system a new script. The third step is somatic healing. Because the wound isn't only in your mind, it lives in your body. You might notice it as tension in your chest, a flinch when someone reaches out, or a numbness where touch should bring comfort. Healing here can be as simple as placing your own hand over your heart, breathing deeply, and reminding your body it is safe now. Gentle practices like yoga, meditation, or even hugging yourself can start teaching your nervous system that affection no longer means danger. Ask yourself, what did I need back then that I never got? How can I begin to give it to myself now? Maybe it's allowing yourself to rest without guilt. Maybe it's saying no when you've always said yes. Maybe it's learning to let safe people close enough to hold you without fear. Healing doesn't erase the past, but it changes your relationship to it. The child you were may never receive the hugs they missed, but the adult you are can finally learn to give them. And that is how you begin to unlearn the silence, step by step. So let's look at the journey you've just walked. You began as the child who was never hugged, lying awake in the silence, teaching yourself not to need what every human being is wired to crave. You carried that absence like a secret wound, hidden behind masks of strength, achievement, or independence. And as you grew, the mask kept you alive, but it also kept you apart from love, from trust, from yourself. The consequences followed you into adulthood: hypervigilance, perfectionism, fear of rejection, the constant ache of wanting to be close, but never quite believing it's safe. For years, you may have thought this was simply who you are, but now you see the deeper truth. This was not your fault. This was the survival strategy of a child who had no other choice. And yet, inside that truth lies the turning point. Because while no one came to hold you then, you can choose to hold yourself now. You can decide that the cycle of neglect ends with you. You can choose to listen to the voice of the buried child, to reparent them, to bring them out of the silence. Healing doesn't mean you'll never feel the ache again. It means the ache will no longer define you. It means that instead of waiting for someone else's arms, you begin to trust your own. It means that every time you tell yourself, I matter, I'm safe, I deserve love, you are rewriting the story that once defined you. And here is the hope I want you to carry. You may never have had the childhood you deserved, but you still have the future you can create. The child who was never hugged does not have to remain unloved. The adult you are becoming can give them what they always needed. So when you close this video, I want you to ask yourself, what is one small way I can hold myself today? Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's reaching out to a safe friend. Maybe it's as simple as placing your hand over your chest and breathing deeply. Because the truth is this: you never had a childhood, but you still have a future. And the embrace you've always longed for is one you can begin to give yourself, starting now. If this message touched you, share your reflections in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the psychology of childhood wounds and healing, subscribe. Because your healing matters, and you are not alone.